Thanks for tuning in. Today I want to share this passage with you from Isaiah chapter number 46. Beginning in verse 8, he says, "Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, your transgressors. Remember the former things of old. For I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from the ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose, calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel far from a far country. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed, and I will do it. Listen to me, you stubborn of heart, you who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion, for Israel, my glory." Well, the whole chapter has so many wonderful truths in it. And if you go to the very end, you see, he says, I'll put my salvation in Zion. And that's exactly what he did when he sent Jesus, his own son, to do this work that we could not do. But he starts and he says, remember this and stand firm. So here Israel is in a state of chaos and going into captivity. It looks like, the end is near. But he says, remember this and stand firm. See, the beginning of the chapter begins as a rebuke to the remnant of Israel because of their folly of idolatry. Now, in Israel and the surrounding countries, Babylon, they would have idols made by the hands of men. But an idol is simply something that you bow down to and serve. He says, none of the idols in Babylon compare to the one true God. Here, Israel in captivity is surrounded by a culture of idolatry, and they're called to remember and stand firm. Remember whose they are. Remember who they are. So we Christians have the same responsibility, or we're going to be deceived by the false gods of our culture and be distracted by the one true God. You see, we can't let anything distract us from who he is, who he made us to be. That's why in Romans 12:2, the apostle says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. He says, so don't let the world press you into its mold. And that's exactly what the world wants to do with every believer. To press us in its mold, to adopt its values and its priorities. So you look at the world of the unbeliever, and you will look at the life of the believer, and it doesn't seem to be any different. The church kind of looks like a production and a show. And he says, don't do it. Don't do it. Remember whose you are. Remember who you are in him. In Ephesians 6:13, he's been talking about the whole armor of God. And he says, now, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, stand firm. Do you see, friends, that as believers, we live in a world and we're surrounded by evil, but we're refusing not to be pressed into that mold. We have the whole presence of God to be everything we need. We live in an evil day, But he's done everything to give us everything we need to stand and to stand firm. Don't be sucked in by the ways of the world, by the desires of the world, by the passions of the world. For we have but one king and one kingdom. He says, recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old. He was telling them, it's important to remember what got you in this mess. The transgressors are those who fell into idolatry. Their whole history is one of how Jehovah has always delivered them and established them. He goes, keep that right up here. Yes, you have transgressed. Remember what got you in this situation when you live a self-willed, self-directed life. It always ends up in bondage. And we mistake, right? Because we think, I'm free to do whatever I want. But doing whatever you want isn't freedom. It's what leads to our own present Babylon. He says, I am God, and there is none like me. The contrast between the powerless idols made by the hands of men and the one who formed them in the womb, he says. The one who stretched out his hands to create the heavens. He says, remember that you and I are created by the Creator to serve the Creator. None of the things that the world says will give us security and favor and blessings can give us what the good Lord has given to us. He says, declaring the end from the beginning and from the ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purposes. Don't you just love it? Knowing that even though all the promises of God have not become experiential life are now, we don't have to worry about that. All that God Almighty desires, all that he proclaims will be accomplished. No man, no angel, no force can thwart his will. I mean, how silly for us to think that somehow God needs our advice or should be questioned by us on what he's doing and what his timing is and how he's working. For he alone is sovereign. There are times in our lives when we just come to the realization, man, I'm out of control and I can't do anything. And that's the perfect point to stop and remember, I was never designed to be in control. I don't have the wisdom, the discernment to even question. I have this promise. He says, I will accomplish all my purpose. That one who called me is going to accomplish his divine purposes in my life. He says, calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken and I will bring it to pass. I have purpose and I will do it. Looking in the context, I'm not sure if he isn't, speaking about Cyrus the king who had, the eagle as his emblem, but that's to miss the point. He says he's the one who's directing it all. Well, how could God use an unbeliever, a wicked king, to accomplish his will? Well, he's done it over and over. He looks at Nebuchadnezzar, he says, my servant. Why? Because even though they are wicked and they will suffer the consequences of their rebellion, they are simply pawns in the plan of God. God says, I will bring it to pass. I have purposed. I will do it. And I think, and he doesn't need my help. He doesn't need me to get involved, because sometimes I think, well, I need to be doing something. He says, no, rest, trust. Lord, how do you want to work through me? Yes. But more often it's simply rest and watch. As he drew them out of Egypt, he says, sit, be still. I will fight for you. And he goes on, he says, listen to me, you stubborn of heart, you who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. Israel had often been stiff-necked and stubborn, and it'd be easy to look at them and judge them, but honestly, aren't there so many times in our own lives when we too are stubborn, not really want to abide in him, rest in him, but seek our own way? Israel had gone after idols. They, even up to the time when Christ has come and into Zion as promised, to bring righteousness near. They were far from righteousness only because they were trying to establish a righteousness apart from him, a self-righteousness. And any time that we see ourselves as the source of righteousness, we're really far from it. But here you are today. And remember, righteousness is near. It's in him. We become righteous because he so desired a relationship with us that he sent his own son, Jesus, to come and go to the cross, to become what we were, sinners. He took all of our transgressions and nailed them to the cross. He went to the grave and he rose again to give you and I newness of life, to give us deliverance, and to make us righteous. And I hope that you know that you have entrusted yourselves to him and his perfect work, to know that he is your salvation and your deliverance. I have purposed it, and I will do it. There's a lot there, friends, and I hope it encourages you to know that when you're living in a chaotic, evil world, you know God is working and will accomplish his good will for you. I love you, and I hope you have a great day.